one franchise, and we already know who that person is. We didn't name him, but people have named him, has suggested as many as 8 RTMs.
Is it
So, which is a
Punjab
unique.
Kings, Nagraj?
I'm not
So,
naming because that
so
person will slap me.
It makes for perhaps the greatest spectacle off the field as far as cricket is concerned, but at what cost does it come? We're awaiting the details on the rules and the right to match cards and the retentions ahead of the next mega auction as we enter a new cycle of the IPL. And the question we're asking on ESPN Cricinfo Runorder is the mega auction good for the IPL? I have a few wise gentlemen with me to try and answer that question. George Benoit, Dustin Silgado, ESPN Cricinfo Runorder regulars. But we will start with Nagraj Golapudi, our senior editor. Nagraj, we've heard over the years there have been enough rumblings about whether teams really like the mega auction, whether they want the mega auction to continue. What is the sense you gather from the 10 teams as we await what is to follow for 2025?
Before I go there, we've always given BCCI the stick for not being proactive, sitting on it. Franchises have grumbled in private about never getting in touch with them. So amazingly, the BCCI has been very proactive in this case. And for the past easily 2 odd months, I've been told that IPL's head or COO and BCCI's acting chief executive, Hemang Amin, has been visiting, meeting all IPL franchises to seek feedback. Imagine BCCI seeking feedback and not imposing things. The key points that I have gathered, and without going too much into detail, which we'll break up, is one is that what are the number of retentions? The consensus is split on that, but the needle is hovering between 5 and about between 4 to 6, I would say, is where the needle is hovering in terms of retentions. One franchise, and we already know who that person is. We didn't name him, but people have named him, has suggested as many as 8 RTMs.
Is it
So, which is a
Punjab
unique.
Kings, Nagraj?
I'm not
So-
naming because that
so-
person will slap me.
you're saying 8 RTMs and no retentions.
Yes,
That's what they
8
want.
RTMs. No, instead of retentions, go for 8 RTMs.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are the two things. And then the standard solution of a combination of retentions plus RTMs, which has been tried out already by BCCI. So these are the key things.
Some people might need an explainer on what an RTM is. You can refer to Nagaraj's news story on the auction. It will be laid out there in great detail.
Nice way you're
Yes.
putting pressure on me. Right,
So
that
this
story.
team,
No,
this team that wants 8 RTMs, which is right to match, is basically saying that we'll let other teams bid so that they can all show how valuable this player is, and then we'll come in for that player. That's
But
but in all,
the marketing strategy.
or maybe they themselves aren't sure of what the value is, so they let the
Correct.
other team, they
Yeah.
let the marketplace decide what the value is and then raise that baton.
Yeah, but I
They
do
know
think
that.
that is a more sensible way to go, because otherwise you lose a huge chunk from your salary cap if you retain a lot of people. Whereas then if you let the auction decide what the value of a player is, and then you have the choice to match that bid or not. So I do think, I like the RTM more than the retention.
The drama of then also watching the owner's face as a player who they wanted to retain, price goes up. Like you can just focus on their face, as this player who they could have retained for 6 crore suddenly becomes 8 crore, 10 crore, 12 crore, and you just focus it on their face.
Yeah, or two teams go really hard and bid for a player, and then their previous owner comes back and swoops in with the RTM.
It does make for great viewing, and I do want to get a sense of what you would do in an ideal world, and I'll throw that question a little later. But first, George, Dustin, weigh in on the mega auction in itself, the pros and cons. Are you in favor of the mega auction? The big argument against it is that it forces teams into a reset, having done all the hard work for just 3 years.
The only reason I like it is that every 3 years there's a bit of a churn, something completely new to look forward to in terms of teams. But I do think the cons of a mega auction outweighs the good. There's too much churn. There's a disconnect between fans and the players that they've been supporting, because ultimately I think fans support players more are more connected to players than they are to teams, and you don't want to see all the players that you've supported move off to various other teams. And I'm getting old; it's hard to keep track of who's playing for who
You have
every
no
mega
gray hair,
auction.
boss. What are you talking about?
It's
Getting old and all.
yeah, you can feel like how much, for example, the Mumbai Indians fans missed Hardik Pandya when he left, and then that rousing reception when he came back. They were so disconnected from their team, and then he came back, and that connection came back straight away.
Like I'd love to
Tribalism, boss.
see.
Tribalism.
I'd
Of
love
a
to see
different
how
sort.
many fans RCB retains if they ever lose Kohli to another team. It'd be.
I think we can safely assume that won't happen.
Yeah, he said he's
Kohli
for
and
life.
RCB.
RCB for life.
Yeah, look, I don't think that you need that the fans necessarily have a connection to every player from a team. I think there's a core of 4 or 5 players, and that's what the IPL has usually allowed teams to retain. Usually in the big auctions, it's around 4 players, maybe plus some RTMs, and I think, frankly, that rule is kind of fine. Unless you're getting into the territory of saying that teams are actually skill building for players, like they're taking young players and then developing them, and then why should they let them go? If that is the aim, then maybe you introduce a new rule that says that, okay, if any team is the first team to buy a player in the IPL, like they're the first team to ever have that player, then maybe they have some special rights over retaining that player where they can retain that player for a certain amount that is not part of their usual retention. So like Lucknow had Mayank Yyadav, they can say, okay, this is a special retention for us. And the added advantage of like more rules in the mega auction is that it's more things to confuse RCB. So then like RCB will buy a player who had been bought before, but think that they were the first to buy him and then mess up their whole auction strategy because of that. And that's what adds to the masala of the auction.
I just think the teams should be rewarded for the effort they put in. And teams that struggle to build a side, as in its incentive to actually put some thought into the team building over a longer term period rather than just say, okay, we're going to plan for 3 years and then after that we reset and it.
This is one of the arguments that you can perhaps look at, say, an MI from where they had reached at, say, the end of IPL 2020, which was one of the most dominant title-winning campaigns, and the sort of setup they'd managed to assemble, Nagraj, over between the 2015 to 1920 period, and then having to see all of that disband. That tends to be one of the bigger arguments when it wasn't just a team built on stars, but a team which also had a lot of these first-timers in the IPL who then grew into superstars. That's what leads more weight into this argument of allowing teams to keep the players they build or find.
Interesting choice, MI.
From the past.
The well-known rumor on the IPL market is what MI decides, IPL decides. But in that sense, it will be interesting to know what MI actually is thinking this time, because there are so many. There's so much speculation on some of their key players, including Suryakumar Yyadav, who's been elevated to India's T20 captaincy, and Rohit Sharma, the predecessor to Hardik Pandya at MI and India's captain in Test and ODI. So the point that you're making is, yes, it's right that every franchise wants to invest in their own young talent. Like MI's case is Tilak Verma. They would want to retain Tilak Verma, no doubt about that. He'd be one of the top players to retain. In the past, it was Bumrah, Pandya brothers, clearly. But if you remember that retention, it was because of retention and the cap on retention that's Hardik. They had to choose between Pollard and Hardik, and they eventually went for Pollard in that last auction, and which allowed GT to pick Hardik immediately. But the point that I actually didn't make in my first answer is, let me remind you that one interesting experiment, if it can be termed as experiment, is about the mega auction broadly is, instead of 3 years, why not do it 5 years? Which I like the idea. I like not because it's come from a franchise, but if you look at it, it's a wise idea in the sense like it allows the franchises, whoever, like in the sense of let's take KKR's case. Who was the guy? It's Rinku, and they've unearthed some talents like Rinku to Suyash to Harshit Rana recently. These three guys. So Varun Chakravarti. Oh yeah. So they would want to retain all these players, correct? But and then you're asking them suddenly there is a number put. Now you have to choose between these three or these two plus Sunil Narine, Ray Russ, Shreyas Iyer, blah blah blah. So out of 6 to 7, you're asking them to pick 4, so you're forcing them. So what they're saying is, instead of asking us to overhaul this kind of a thing, why don't you allow us to keep this squad for 5 years and let us kind of own these players? Why don't we kind of and not allow these players to retain? That's the other side of the thing. That allow 5-year contracts, or rather, mega auctions every 5 years. Don't put the reset button. And number 2 is, if there's a purse decided, give us, like, say that 100 odd crores is a purse for this mega auction. You allow us to kind of calibrate between us players, So give us the complete ownership.
So that's the important thing about the mega auction, right? Like, so there are players who are on the rolls of these teams for prices that are far below their market value. Like, Jitesh with Punjab, Rinku with KKR. I think they're on like 50 lakh, 20 lakh. They were bought for that much at the auction. So unless they're being remunerated in some other way or form, it's good for the player to go into the mega auction, because then they will get a fair price, because players like them are in much higher demand now than they were a couple of years ago. So yeah, if they were to be stuck on that contract for like 5 years, it's not great for the player.
Okay, lots of ideas, lots of suggestions that keep coming up. I want to go around the room and ask you all, if you were the highest power in the IPL universe, don't all of us wish to be that? Nagraj already is that, so I'll start with Nagraj. What would your ruling be? What would your ideal combination of retentions or RTM cards be going into the 2025 cycle? Over to you. How would that be, Nagraj Golapuri?
Yeah, don't change. I think what the model they had in the past, I think around 2017 was a good one, where you have, like, you just decide the number. If it's 6, then you do a combination of retentions plus RTMs. You give 2 RTMs and maybe 4 retentions. That gives you the core. The core is what everyone wants. And if you can retain the core, you build the squad. So I think that is an easy solution. And franchises can play around with. And I do like the idea of the 5-year mega auction.
Not a fan of the mega auction. I think having the mini auction every year is enough of a churn. So yeah, I do away with the mega auction. Just find a way to compensate the players fairly. The players who deserve more than what they've been paid at the previous auction.
Okay, so we've got pragmatic, we've got ideal. Dustin,
so I would say mega auction every 3 years. 4 retentions, 2 right to match cards, 1 special homegrown player card where you can retain somebody who you have bought for the first time, and 1 mystery player card where all the other franchises vote for who you should retain.
I'm confused already.
But that's the beauty then. That would make for an even greater spectacle than we already have.
So you're saying 7, boy.
7 plus an 8th, which is decided by other teams. Well done, Dustin. You have outdone yourself. I am glad I kept you as the final word on this. On that note, George Binoy, Nagraj Golapuri, Dustin Silgado, thank you so much for your time. Viewers, you tell us, what is the best mix? What would you do if you had the power to decide which way the IPL teams go from here to the next cycle? This was ESPN Cricinfo Runorder.